Welcome to this Bytes podcast. I'm Anthony Arrand. I'm one of the technical pre-sales architects here at Bytes, and I'm joined by...
Yeah, I'm Sam Woodcock. I'm from 1111 Systems. Really great to join you today. I'm focused on the cloud strategy aspects at 1111 Systems, but also helping us kind of help customers together from a technology side. So that's really where my focus is for the last decade at 1111, helping customers solve key strategic challenges that they have and aligning technology, people, and process to help solve those challenges as well. So great to join you.
Great. And today's kind of that discussion around the Broadcom acquisition of VMware and how we're seeing customers talk about it and what the impacts it's having on them.
Yeah, if you look at the situation, right, VMware acquired by Broadcom towards the end of last year, and obviously that was completed, and there's been a lot of change since then, and I think from what we've seen, it's really rapid from Broadcom's side, right? So for a lot of VMware customers, they've seen a lot of change in a lot of short space of time, and really that's caused them to really evaluate what the direction of their business is going to be going forward, what strategic direction they're going to take, and again, if we just summarize some of the changes that have been made, they've moved from that perpetual licensing model through to a subscription model. For a lot of customers, they've seen price changes and in fact potentially price increases, which has kind of seen the need to evaluate what's happening in the space. And also alongside that, just kind of support changes to what products they're focused on at Broadcom as well. And so again, we're seeing a lot of organizations taking a step back and deciding what is the direction I want to go in the short term, but also what's the long-term strategic direction of the organization as well.
Yeah. And some of the conversations we've been having is kind of looking at those next generation of those moves towards the likes of Hyper-V, Nutanix, or even some of those freeware versions. And the discussions we're talking about is kind of what skill set changes do those bring in? How does it actually look from a true cost of ownership? What's that training session going to look like? How do you actually equate to 5 engineers who've got 15 years worth of VMware experience now looking at Hyper-V? And what's those losses that they're going to have with things like disaster recovery or seamless failover?
Yeah, I mean, again, the primary reason that a lot of these organizations are looking at a change or looking at what their options are is because potentially they've seen some form of price uplift with this change, right? Some organizations actually have seen price decreases, although they're the minority. For a lot of organizations, they're seeing some uplift, and for some organizations, it's quite considerable. So that's, again, caused this kind of look towards what strategic options that they have. And like you've mentioned, right, it's going to be, number one, do I stay with what I have today? Can I stay in that current infrastructure that I have and maybe take that uplift and continue in that direction, maybe in the short term? Or am I going to look towards a different technology, a different platform locally? Again, Hyper-V, Nutanix, other options. Proxmox is something that we hear from our customers. But also they're looking towards, do I look towards a public cloud vendor like an Amazon or an Azure to actually modernize my infrastructure? And where 1111 sits actually between those two situations is that we're a VMware-based cloud service provider in the middle that can actually help organizations take their existing investments and actually move those to our environment and see benefits around cost, skill sets, the platform itself as part of that. And I think when they're looking at those options, as you've said, there's lots of important things that you need to think about. What is the cost of change towards skilling up for that infrastructure to get those new skill sets within my business? Do I need to get external training? Do I need to get third-party expertise in there? That's going to be a key consideration. Also, what is the cost and the time and complexity involved in actually taking what I have and moving it to a different platform? And once I'm there, does that platform have all of the things that I'm going to need around data protection, connectivity, compliance, security? All of those types of things are really important. That should be part of that due diligence process. So we're seeing a lot of organizations spending great deal of time on that and to understand where the best fit is for that.
So when it comes to 1111, what makes you a good fit in those kind of situations? How do you help customers do that move?
Yeah.
Is it platform as a service and kind of what do you bring to the table?
Yeah, so we're a global cloud service provider across all regions across the world. We actually have a dedicated cloud service platform for customers to consume, and that actually powers what we call our infrastructure as a service and disaster recovery as a service solutions. And so where we feel we're a good fit for those types of customers that are considering their options is we're a VMware-based cloud service provider. We're actually a Broadcom Pinnacle partner. And so we have a lot of expertise, a lot of history, a lot of skill set in actually managing VMware-based environments. And what that translates to for customers is we purpose-built a VMware platform, again, globally available, keeps things like data sovereignty and compliance there for customers, and allows customers to take their existing applications, what they've invested a lot of time, effort, and money into, take those existing investments and simply take those and lift and shift them into our environment, whilst at the same time actually providing things like cost optimization. So one of the things that's really fundamental to our platform is that our commercial model is really easy to understand, purely based on CPU, memory, and storage, things that people are used to. No additional cost beyond that point. And we can actually right-size the environment based on what the customer actually needs. So typically, a lot of customers maybe oversize their environment to account for seasonal demand, ad hoc usage that they need, maybe bursts that they have during seasonal periods. Customers can actually purchase exactly what they need from us, but at the point where they need more, they can burst and use that as they need it. So that is a major point for a lot of customers, especially when the reason for moving from potentially their on-premises environment is cost. We want to provide a platform that's easy to understand and that can potentially optimize that cost footprint down for a customer as well.
So what you're saying is that customers won't have to renegotiate with VMware. They come straight to you. They're getting that as a bulk buy just on CPU, memory, and storage, and there's no more headache of that renegotiation piece.
Exactly right, yeah. So they can understand what is really critical to their business. What do I need to keep within my infrastructure footprint? What we do is we bring in-house tools, we call it Catalyst from our side, that assesses their environment to make sure that it's compatible with what we run. We're a VMware-based platform, so it should be, but we always do the due diligence to understand what that looks like. That tool then understands exactly the footprint of resources that are needed to power that application 24/7, 365, and that's what we're basing the footprint on. And so again, that provides those cost savings to the customer. And again, at the same time, we're looking at all of the prerequisites that are needed around the data protection side, the connectivity, how customers and users connect to that platform as part of that planning. But it is very simple in terms of us being able to take what they already have, what they've invested in, and shifting it, moving it into our platform. We can manage the whole end-to-end experience for a customer.
Oh, great. So a lot of our customers, obviously, where you've got on-premise kit, you've got cloud and everything else, they've invested quite heavily in things like IAC. Is that something they can bring those scripts to your environment? Is there any bottlenecks there, or how does that work? Or is it we've got to stand up tin before we can start work? Kind of how does that look?
No, so the platform is ready to go. It's kind of purpose-built on kind of core hardware and software technologies that the customer most likely is already using in their environment. So again, part of our value to customers is them having that existing skill set and investment. They can transfer that across very seamlessly, and there's no investment needed. And if they have, as an organization, made a lot of investments, for example, in automation and scripting and other pieces like that, they have access to both the underlying VMware API technologies that are offered to allow them to automate specific component parts in the infrastructure. And at the same time, our platform has a northbound RESTful API that they can contact to actually perform any action in the environment. So automation that they have existing in place can be transferred across. Alongside that, they can make new investments in automation on our platform around things like data protection and security, for example.
Oh, brilliant. So when it comes to the security of the environment, how are you guys able to provide kind of antivirus, firewalls, and that kind of stuff? What are the options for the customers?
Yeah, so first, before I answer the question, I think that's really a key consideration that I think organizations need to think about as they're shifting potentially from VMware technology to a new platform or a new cloud service provider, right? What does that provider or technology have in place in terms of ecosystem support? What does that cost? What does it offer to my business? Does it fulfill the requirements of the organization? And I think often when people are considering new technologies or platforms, maybe they assume certain things, and maybe when they come into that experience, there's certain gaps. So I think that's a really critical piece to think about before you take the leap. Understand what is possible, understand what the cost looks like before making that leap. And from our side, we've built in security into our platform from day one. We have a number of industry-leading technologies integrated into the core platform. We maintain, manage, configure, and make those available for customers, and we're responsible for that. And when customers bring in vital applications into our footprint and our platform, those applications can speak natively to that underlying security platform so that they can get things like encryption at rest, they can get things like vulnerability scanning, they can get things like malware and antivirus scanning, intrusion prevention. All of these things are just fundamentally built into the platform itself. But what we also find is that obviously not every organization is the same, so they may bring in third-party technologies alongside what we offer to add additional steps and component parts to their security experience as well.
So how are you helping customers deal with kind of existing cyber threats and things that we're seeing in the market where they could be targeted? And we're looking at things like services around kind of disaster recovery, data backup, and all that kind of stuff as a service.
Yeah, for us, we've been actually in the disaster recovery as a service space probably for 2 decades or more from our combined foundational organizations that make up 1111 Systems. So we've been really focused on again, disaster recovery for some time, again, around things like traditional natural disasters, data center level issues, infrastructure failures, those types of things that maybe were on the rarer side of the equation in terms of risk for customers. But what we've particularly seen over the last 5+ years from our side has really been a renewed focus on cyber resilience, cyber recovery, and cyber protection from our side. And that's really evolved the conversation that we have with organizations. What we've seen from our side is with our partners, such as Bytes and others from our alliance side, is we've seen this general huge rise in cybercrime across the industry, across the world. And these things are happening actually to business. I think in the past, if you think about disaster recovery, how likely were the scenarios actually going to impact your business? And for a lot of organizations, maybe that caused them to maybe not put in a solution, or put in a solution that maybe was not 100% ready for going for the disaster recovery side of things. I think what we've seen with cybercrime is we've seen organizations being hit potentially each year or multiple times in a single year by cybercrime from things like ransomware. And so that's really focused the need to have something in place for recovery. So what we've done is, using that infrastructure as a service platform, again, globally available, we use that same platform for recovery purposes, for actually recovering customers from cyber incidents. So that's a production-ready platform, again, with all of the things that you need to power applications ready to go. And what we do is we use a data mover to get the movement of data from their primary location to ours. Depending on the types of recovery points they've got, we'll use different technologies to achieve those aims. And then what we do on the recovery side is we have that infrastructure ready to go. And more importantly for a customer, they can just pay for what they need when they need it. So that typically means when they're doing data protection, they're just paying for the storage footprint. And then in a recovery scenario, they use CPU and memory on demand, which really lowers the cost of disaster recovery and cyber recovery for their business, whilst giving them what they need in that cyber incident. Alongside that, just briefly, I would also say that expertise really matters at that point. If you think about recovery, again, there's that skill set in disaster recovery, which some organizations may have, but cyber recovery is a completely different, different animal, right? It's a completely different new world. And I think where a lot of organizations come to 1111 is because we have that expertise in cyber resiliency and recovery, because recovering from a cyber incident needs multiple different layers, potentially delving deeper into a backup archive to get data, and to be able to understand, is that data that I'm recovering clean, ready to go, and built to recover the business as well.
One of the words we hear a lot now, it seems to be the biggest buzzword going, is immutability. Yeah. How does immutability work? How does it help people? And we found people turning on immutability for 10, 20 years and forgetting that the data is just going to grow. We're not going to be able to reduce it. I guess using 1111 is going to help us kind of manage that data a bit better and understand where that needs to be enacted.
100%. That is, I think you hit the nail on the head in terms of that piece, is that when you're thinking about how you protect your data, what you should protect, how frequently you should protect it, how long term you store the data, whether you turn on immutability or don't, it first needs a step to actually understand strategically what is vital to the business, what is the vital data assets, what is the minimal viable set of applications that are needed to power the business at its basic level. And so we spend a lot of time understanding what that looks like, helping customers understand that, working across their business to understand what that looks like, so we can focus the solution on where it matters the most. And then if we think about things like retention and immutability, that's again a cross-business kind of collaboration effort, because you don't want immutability for everything. You don't need immutability for everything. It's about the vital data assets, what's needed from a compliance and legal side, and what's needed for the customer base as to when you turn on certain aspects of it. Because like you say, you could turn immutability on for 10 years, but that has a huge cost impact. And it's about weighing up risk versus cost for a lot of organizations.
Some of the customer questions that I get quite a bit, and I'm sure you do as well, is things like hardware going end of life, and what to do if you're closing down an office or looking to try and do that migration away from looking after your own kit. And I know we've got some mutual customers that we've dealt with in the past, and we've got some ongoing now.
Yeah, I mean, we have a customer within the insurance sector that I know ourselves worked on together from that side of things, and it was really exactly that around their infrastructure becoming end of life, and really the rapid need to make change, again, really quickly for that organization. I think what that pointed out to me for that specific opportunity is the need to get ahead of that change sooner, right? To be able to spend a more time planning, understanding the things that are really non-negotiables with new solutions, getting ahead of that in advance helps with that whole effort. And I think with that specific customer, again, the hardware was becoming end of life, but if you rewind that and look at that slightly differently, if you'd have maybe been able to get ahead of that earlier, you know when that situation is going to arise, you know the specific date in which that's going to take place, and if you know that, you can almost plan backwards to understand how long do I need.
Yeah, it's almost buying yourself that extra bit of time. It's just how do we look to the future, but we know we've got this stuff happening right now. How do we fill that stopgap? How do we look at modernization? Do we want to reinvest that in hardware on premise, or do we want to move to somewhere where we're not managing it and we can start concentrating on more what's going to be happening moving forward? So is there going to be a modernization piece? How can we reflect those contracts, bring them in line so that we're not tied into kind of long-term costs for kind of short-term gain? And I think that's where having that partnership between Bytes and 1111 really works, because we can have those strategic discussions and actually look at not just the problem right now, but those bits that sit around it that could cause headaches, that renewal security, those products that might be in there as well. I think there was quite a few technologies we recommended at this point.
Yep.
So that DR as a service using Zerto, being able to use VMware across there as well. And it's making it work for those customers, I think, really is that great relationship we have with our customers.
Yeah, I think because we're able to understand that situation a little bit more, understand some of the dates and some of the prerequisites in advance, we can help put in place a solution that meets their needs. And I think for a lot of organizations that we both speak to, in the ideal world, they would keep familiar technology that they trust, that they've built up a lot of experience in, because again, that's going to reduce potentially some of the headaches in movement and allow them to continue to get that benefit from those pieces. So I think for us, having kind of technology that aligned to what they use today was kind of removing some of the barriers to potentially thinking about that. But also, again, being able to leverage those technologies as well, help them achieve things like disaster recovery as a service to the levels that they need around recovery points, recovery times, things like that as well.
And it's also, let's face it, inherently techies like what they like, and we've grown accustomed to the tools we enjoy working with.
Yep.
Trying to tear something away from a techie is very hard. So it's nice to have that the options out there. And then we can slowly move to that modern way of thinking, that infrastructure is moving away from infrastructure as a service, more to platform as a service.
100%. And at the same time, if you also build in a bit more time into that kind of, I guess, planning process, that evaluation process, maybe it will involve maybe a change of technology, but because you have the amount of time built into that process, you can potentially improve upon the situation that you have in the past, right? You could get better at recovery, you could get better at security if you have a bit more time to think about that overall as well.
I think we've also run into other customers that are on the other spin, where they have had to rush into cloud, or they've rushed into certain providers, and we start looking at things like repatriation of data, repatriation of services into a platform that they can then manage. I'm talking from personal experience where I've worked in organisations where we've put data out to cloud, and our costs have gone from kind of 20, 30 grand a year because we've got a data centre and we're sweating assets to 100, 200 grand a month. So it's being able to have those kind of discussions with the customers and working with partners alongside us to understand how we can stop that unpredictable, that spiky kind of costs, and how do we make it work.
Yeah, I think we've both seen customers that, again, have gone all in on, for example, a public cloud platform, and then later on down the line, they've understood that actually there's certain additional component parts that make up the cost model. And then that leads to potentially budgeting challenges with actually kind of being able to operate in that cloud platform. And again, they have to choose to potentially make a different decision, and it can be relatively tough to maybe deleverage certain aspects of that solution. So we've mentioned it a few times so far, but spending more time doing due diligence, doing planning, understanding the capabilities of those platforms, the costs that are attributed by doing those things, understanding those things up front can allow you to make better decisions. But again, we also realize that some customers have made decisions to move into public cloud, and that's helped their business move forward, but they also need a different approach now. Maybe they do want to bring it back on premises. They want to bring it to a different cloud model to help optimize that cloud footprint, those costs. Something we both help organizations do because we have that great knowledge in terms of being able to understand applications and move them as well.
I think one of the drums I bang a lot is the modernisation where appropriate. It's understanding that there are workloads that are going to fit into public cloud. There are workloads that do remain on premise. So if you're buying an off-the-shelf application, for instance, you may want to keep that back in-house. If you're designing a website, let's move that somewhere that's more appropriate.
Yep.
And I think it's helping customers understand those differences is critical to what we do.
100%. I think if you understand the application and how it's accessed by your employees, by your customers, understanding the performance profile needs, certain aspects around the availability of the application. You can evaluate, again, what is best going to be able to power that. And again, for a lot of customers, that is going to be public cloud, because there's lots of great availability of platform level services in those environments. There's lots of modern approaches that you can leverage from using those platforms, but at the same time, again, understand what the business objective is, the strategic and the technical objective allows you to, again, find the best place to house the application. Sometimes that's going to be us, but sometimes it's going to be another cloud or another service. And I think that's really important, again, to take it away from a technology decision to more of a business strategic and what is the ultimate aim, where is going to help you achieve that in the least amount of time, least amount of complexity, and the most optimal cost. That should be the things that organizations are thinking of before they make the decision as well.
And I think that's another thing, like as you just said there, is I think we work quite well with our customers in the fact that they don't feel like we're trying to shoehorn them into a specific solution. It's not a one-stop shop for every IT need. We know that there are going to be differences, and like you just said, there are times that you guys aren't the right fit.
Yeah.
But it's how do we get them to that point? How do we help them understand that sometimes we do need to make tweaks? There are positions that, working with the likes of 1111, that we can put things in like dedicated lines into AWS or Azure so that we can have those workloads easily and seamlessly bounce between the environments. And I think, as we said in the talking about another customer, was that ability to be able to look at contracts and costs and making sure that they're not fixed into something that's not going to be fit for purpose in 6 months or a year's time.
100%. So yeah, spending more time, again, understanding where the best place is allows you to make the right decisions. And then, as you say, connectivity is super critical, right? Because for a lot of customers that we both speak to, I think it is the most common situation now that organizations are multi-cloud based, right? Yeah. They're on premises, they're in public cloud, they're using SaaS, they're using vendors like 1111 maybe for disaster recovery as a service. And all of those things are interconnected in different ways. The dependencies are really important. And so connectivity plays a vital role in being able to provide the right user experience, the right experience between those environments going forward as well.
Yeah. It is, like you said, that it's the understanding that people are truly moving more towards a hybrid cloud environment. And as I said with the last customer, we have had people doing that repatriation, bring it back on premise. But there is always going to be that level of hybrid infrastructure. It's going to be, are we using SaaS services like Office 365? Do we still need virtual machines in countries that we potentially might not have a footprint? Do we need to build data centers? And I think with your global footprint, that sits quite nicely. Is you might be in the middle of Africa or South America trying to deploy stuff, but you don't want to build a data center. You don't want to sit there and spin up a comms room. You want to be able to easily move there. And there's a chance it might be a 6-month project, it might be a year project. How do we then fluidly bring that back to where it needs to be? And also it's the cases we have in the likes of China and Russia. How do we deal with data sovereignty? And I think that's one of the discussions we were having earlier as well, is that the ability to make sure our data lives where it needs to. And I think having someone that's got a private cloud or even public cloud where we can control that is quite critical. And it's understanding that customer requirement. Yeah. And I think 1111 helped really well there as well.
Data sovereignty is probably one of the number one topics we most often speak about with customers. They want to understand exactly where their data is, where it's going to stay, is it going to move anywhere? That's a really critical prerequisite when customers are speaking to us, but also other providers. And I think that's always been what we try to help with customers, because I think if they can also understand that the data is going to stay where they want to, that's a number one, but also it helps build that trust in what we're offering and delivering to customers. But like you say, a lot of customers are looking potentially for short-term requirements, but also they're looking to go into new regions and markets, but also reduce the risk if it doesn't work out.
Just dip your toe in where you need to and know that you're not going to be burnt by it.
And that's where cloud in general is really helps customers, because they can start off very, very small, maybe a single machine or a single set of applications. And if it doesn't kind of work out, they can kind of deleverage that platform. If it does, then they can just grow it as they need it. And I think that's where really cloud has seen a big benefit to organizations from my side.
I think that's also a great fit into kind of that using you guys as a private cloud, is that you're not buying into that obsolete kit that you know is going to be end of life in 3-5 years time, and just giving that fluid option. We see it quite a bit when we start looking at people looking at infrastructure, and they're like, well, we know we're going to have 4 terabytes of data and 120 cores of CPU that we need, but we know that's potentially going to grow by 10%, 20%. We need to invest that CapEx now to be able to grow into it.
Yep.
Whereas leveraging your platform, we kind of take a step away from that.
Exactly. Start with what you exactly need, and then depending on the rate in which you grow or the capacity you need, you can grow into it versus, again, like you say, this large capital expenditure up front, which is a lot for businesses to take on, especially when budgets are getting tighter and focus is needed in this business. We see a lot of organizations that really want to kind of fine tune that again to reduce their risk and to ultimately make it more efficient as well.
We're buying, consuming data on premise. We haven't got to worry about that cooling, that heating, that electricity, and we've not got to worry about the tin that's still sat there.
Yeah, I mean, for a lot of organizations where their focus is how can I innovate? How can I push the business forward? How can I focus on the strategic side? Keeping the actual infrastructure running and the platform itself potentially isn't something that the business wants their highly skilled team to be really focused on. And I think that's where ourselves and other cloud service providers, we're responsible for those pieces, and really the customer can focus beyond that and above that to the application and the innovation aspect, whilst letting a service provider take on the day-to-day of keeping that available, keeping it available for organizations as well.
Yeah, I think talking from experience, working with organizations that are kind of 35 offices globally, and you've got one central IT team. Well, how do you manage that infrastructure when it's based in the middle of South America and your team's based in the UK? And you've got to fly people everywhere to do the maintenance, or you've got to find someone that you trust to be able to do that work. I think that's kind of one of the things we get away from with these kind of conversations, is that we can have someone manage that for you, look after that for you. And while it's not your tin, definitely your VMs, we're doing encryption at rest and that kind of stuff. We can make sure that there is that data silo and sovereignty, that people aren't going to be able to get to your information, and we can give you that peace of mind.
100%. Managing global infrastructure is a challenge for anyone, and I think, again, it's about understanding where you want your focus to be as an organization, and allowing kind of expertise to come in to help kind of manage that that aspect. And I think that's something we focused on, but a lot of organizations also focused on, is again being able to take care of that kind of global management, being able to make sure that that's available for customers, and simply let them consume it as they need to as well. So it's allowed organizations that we've both spoken to, I think, to really focus again where the business wants to move towards, and to help kind of focus that talent, which is often in short supply, on more critical aspects for their business as well.
That's it. You just want to keep the lights. You want someone else worrying about keeping the lights on while you're worrying about what the business requires.
Yep.
So yeah, we discussed quite a bit in this podcast. Obviously, there is way more to be spoken about, but I think one of the key takeaways I have from this is the fact that there isn't one strategy to meet every customer requirement. And we know that some customers are probably going to relate to one or two things that we've discussed today. There may be some that hit that entire broad kind of base of what we discussed. But it's just being able to talk to an organisation that's not going to be trying to feed you down one path and get you to where they want you to be. But it's that taking that customer strategy and making it a wider scope, and making sure the customer understands that there are options, and it's not just going to be one shoe for everything you want to do.
Yeah, I mean, we speak both to organizations across all sorts of different sectors, verticals, industries. They can be very small, they can be extremely large, right? The nature of who we speak to on a daily basis is vast and huge, right? So, like you say, everything is different requirements, different projects, different initiatives, different focuses. And I think where we both help customers is to understand fundamentally what is the challenge that they're trying to solve, what is really critical to them, and really focusing that discussion or that project on that specific objective, right? And that helps us to get to that point. I think my takeaway with everything, and I think I've mentioned this throughout the session and the podcast, is the planning aspect is what delivers the most success, because I think if you can fundamentally understand what is critical, what is important, what are the non-negotiables, what are the things that potentially I don't need within the solution, those specific elements should inform that research process. So you're looking with Bytes and 1111, or you're looking at other organizations and service providers, having those things in mind as you're evaluating those is really critical to make sure that you're making the right choice. Yeah. And I think that is hugely critical, not only in technology decisions, but any decision, right? The more research you do, the more understanding of what the fundamentals are, you're going to make a better decision. I think one of the things that we've personally seen is that some customers, again, have moved into certain environments and then decided, actually, cost isn't what I expected, or data protection isn't present within that environment, so potentially I need to come back, and obviously that's more painful to come back than to maybe spend a little bit more time. So that's my key takeaway, is try and spend a little bit of time in advance, plan ahead, and understand what the fundamentals are in that decision as well.
Let's understand what your plan is, what your roadmap is looking like, and then tie technology to it, not take a technology and try and fit the organisation to that.
Yep.
I think, that's the key piece for most organisations, is let's not just take a brand or a name that we know and try and make our business work towards that. Let's understand where we plug in the right technologies for the right business units.
Yeah, because also technology itself isn't enough on its own, right? You
Yeah.
need to combine it with expertise, talent, and again, align it to the core objectives. So I would never say to make a technology decision purely based on technology. Make it based on, again, what is the North Star of the strategic objective, and where is going to help me do that sooner, quicker, with less pain, less cost associated with it as well.
Brilliant. And yeah, like I said, this is a wider discussion that we can be having through multiple podcasts and webinars and everything else. I think that just leaves us to say thank you to everyone who's kind of listened in and made it this far through the podcast, and hopefully you'll hear more from us soon.
Thank you.